Introduction. Setting the scene. Sophia Hartley stood in front of the large bay window of her family's luxurious estate, gazing out at the sprawling grounds. The sun was setting over the horizon, casting golden hues over the perfectly manicured gardens. It was a scene she had seen countless times in her life, yet it always felt the same, beautiful, serene, and in some ways, hollow. The Hartley family mansion, perched on the edge of the city, had been her home for as long as she could remember. The towering pillars, the grand marble staircase, and the glimmering chandeliers above. It was a life of opulence that had shaped who she was. The finest schools, the most prestigious events, the rarest fashion, Sophia had never lacked for anything. Raised in a world where money was never a problem, Sophia had come to view wealth as both a blessing and a burden. She had grown up surrounded by the finest things money could buy: luxury cars, exotic vacations, and a constant parade of personal assistants, chefs, and housekeepers. Her father, a self-made billionaire, had ensured that she wanted for nothing, and her mother had always been the epitome of grace and sophistication, guiding her through the world of high society. Sophia had learned to navigate this world with ease, attending the best parties, rubbing elbows with celebrities, and never once worrying about bills or the future. But as much as she was grateful for the material comforts, Sophia had always felt something was missing. Beneath the layers of designer clothes and the sparkling jewelry, there was a yearning deep inside her, a longing for something real, something genuine. Despite the endless parties and social events, she had never felt truly understood. The people around her seemed more interested in her wealth and status than in who she truly was. Her friendships felt shallow, built on the surface-level allure of her family's name rather than her personal qualities. Even her romantic relationships had been influenced by her family's influence and the appeal of her wealth. Love, it seemed, was something that could be bought and sold. Her life had been predictable, each day following the next in a comfortable routine. Yet, the older she got, the more she began to question whether this was the life she truly wanted. It wasn't until she met Jake Matthews, a young artist from a modest background, that she began to see the world in a different light. Jake wasn't like anyone she had met before. He didn't care about her family's fortune or the lavish lifestyle she led. Instead, he cared about her, Sophia, the person behind the wealth. He didn't know the world she came from, and, in a strange way, that was the most refreshing thing she had ever encountered. He saw her not as a product of her wealth, but as an individual with her own dreams, passions, and flaws. He made her laugh, made her think, and made her feel things she had never felt before. But their connection, though deep, was threatened by the very life Sophia had been born into. Jake had his own struggles, his own dreams of becoming a successful artist, and their worlds were miles apart. She had everything, and he had nothing. It wasn't just their social differences that created tension. It was the unspoken understanding that love could not simply bridge the gap of wealth and ambition. And now she stood at a crossroads, facing a decision that would change everything. A business opportunity, one that promised to secure her future financially and elevate her family's empire even further, had been laid before her. The offer was everything she had been trained to desire: success, power, and security. But the catch was simple. It would pull her away from Jake, the man who had shown her what true love meant. In that moment, Sophia was caught between the life she knew, built on luxury and convenience, and the life she could have with Jake, full of uncertainty, but rich in love. Her heart ached with the weight of the decision. Would she choose the comfort and security of wealth, or the unpredictable, yet genuine love that Jake had shown her? The tempting offer. Sophia sat in her father's office, the room as grand and imposing as the man himself. The walls were adorned with rare paintings and shelves stacked with financial reports, investment books, and awards that spoke of her father's immense success. The sleek, mahogany desk before her gleamed under the soft, ambient light, and sitting across from her was someone who had been a constant figure in her life: Miles Harper, her father's business partner and close confidant. Miles was a man in his late 40s, sharply dressed, with a cold, calculating gaze that made Sophia uneasy. even though she had known him for years. His voice was smooth, almost persuasive, as he spoke to her about the opportunity he was presenting. "You see, Sophia," he began, his fingers lightly tapping the surface of the desk, "this merger with Ocelot Enterprises is a once-in-a-lifetime deal. It would not only secure your family's place in the business world for generations to come, but elevate your father's empire to a global scale. Think about it. Tens of billions of dollars at your fingertips. The resources, the power, the influence, everything your family has worked for would be yours." He leaned forward, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. "But here's the catch. The CEO of Ocelot Enterprises wants one thing in exchange: your loyalty, completely. This means severing ties with anyone who stands in the way of the deal. That includes Jake Matthews." Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She had been hearing about the Ocelot merger for weeks, but the weight of it hadn't truly hit her until this very moment. Miles's words lingered in the air, heavy with the implications of what was being asked of her. She was being asked to choose between her family's legacy and the one person who had made her feel something real, something beyond the luxury of her life. Her mind raced. The money was unimaginable, life-changing, world-shifting. Her father had always talked about expanding the family business to new heights, making it a global name, and here was the chance to do just that. But in order to secure the deal, Sophia would have to sever all ties with Jake, the man who had given her love and understanding, something her wealth had never been able to provide. Jake had no part in this world, no status, no power, and no wealth. But he had her heart. Sophia could almost feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Miles was watching her intently, his gaze never wavering. He knew she had a reputation for being practical, for making the right choices in terms of family and business. But this was different. This wasn't about numbers or strategy. It was about love. And love, she knew, didn't come with guarantees. The stakes were far greater than anything she had faced before. The offer sat there, in front of her, an impossible choice. The fortune was tantalizing, almost too perfect to ignore. It promised everything she had ever been taught to desire: power, security, status, but at the cost of everything that made her feel truly alive. Could she really walk away from Jake? The thought made her heart ache. He had never asked for her wealth, never expected anything from her but herself. He had always told her that money didn't matter to him, that their love was more than enough. But was it enough to stand up against a lifetime of privilege and opportunity? Would she be foolish to choose love over security, to abandon the future her father had worked so hard to build? Miles's voice cut through her thoughts. "You have a week to make your decision. Think about it, Sophia. This is your chance to solidify your future and your family's place in history." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the desk, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The tension in the room was palpable, the future hanging in the balance, and as she looked out the window, the soft glow of the city below seemed to mock her indecision. Would she choose love, or would she choose the path that promised everything she had been taught to value? Conflict, love versus money. Sophia sat on the balcony of her family's estate, the cool evening breeze sweeping through her hair, but the air felt heavy with the weight of her thoughts. She stared out at the glittering city lights below, her mind swirling in a chaotic whirlwind. It had been 2 days since Miles had left her with the impossible decision: money or love. The world around her seemed to be closing in, each decision pulling her in a different direction, and for the first time in her life, she felt utterly lost. She had always believed that money could solve everything. It had provided her with the best education, the finest clothes, and every material possession she could ever desire. Her life had been structured around the idea that wealth brought security, power, and respect. And now, here it was, the chance to secure a future not just for herself, but for her entire family. The Ocelot merger would elevate the Hartley legacy to unimaginable heights, ensuring her place in the world as a powerful businesswoman. It was everything her father had worked for, everything her family had invested years in building. This was the kind of opportunity that didn't come around twice. She could almost taste the success, the accolades, the recognition, the wealth. But then there was Jake. Jake Matthews, the artist who had shown her a world beyond the glittering facade of wealth. He had never been impressed by her family's fortune or the designer brands she wore. He had always seen her for who she was, Sophia, not a product of her inheritance. He made her feel real, not just a pawn in a world of business deals and power plays. With him, there were no pretenses, no expectations. Their connection was simple, pure, and beautiful, but it was also fragile. Jake had no place in her world of boardrooms and multi-million-dollar mergers. He had no idea how to navigate the world of business deals, nor did he want to. He was content in his modest studio apartment, pursuing his passion for art, while she was expected to be a part of her family's empire. The gap between their worlds was so vast, it was almost insurmountable. She closed her eyes, the image of Jake's warm smile flashing before her mind. How had she come to this crossroads? How had love, something so beautiful and natural, become something she had to choose between, and something that could so easily be sacrificed? Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from her mother, and Sophia's heart sank as she read the words. Sophia, darling, I know you're thinking about the Ocelot deal. You must realize this is an opportunity that will shape your future. Don't let anything, not even love, stand in the way of your success. Your father and I have worked hard to build this empire. It's time for you to step up. I'm sure you'll make the right choice. Sophia's chest tightened as she put the phone down. Her mother's words, always so polished and poised, felt like an icy grip around her heart. She had always been told that family came first, that duty and legacy were the things that mattered most. But what about love? Was it truly so insignificant in the grand scheme of things? Was it a luxury, something only the unburdened could afford? As if on cue, her father's voice echoed in her mind. He had never said it outright, but it was clear from his actions and expectations that success was paramount. He had always emphasized the importance of securing their family's legacy, the Hartley name. In his eyes, love and passion were distractions. Money was the key to everything, everything worth having, everything worth achieving. Sophia turned to face the mansion, the sprawling estate where she had spent her entire life, and a sudden pang of resentment pierced her heart. How had it all come to this? Why was she always being pushed toward this cold, calculated version of success, where human connections seemed secondary to financial gain? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Lily, her closest friend and confidant. Lily had always been there for her, but today, her presence felt different. There was a certain urgency in her eyes as she walked in, her tone a little more serious than usual. Sophia, I know this decision isn't easy, Lily began, sitting beside her. But think about the future. Think about everything you could have, the power, the influence, the respect. If you go for Jake, it'll be a lifetime of uncertainty. You'll be living in his world, one that doesn't have the security or the possibilities you've been given. It's not just about you anymore. It's about your family. Don't let love cloud your judgment. The words felt like a slap, and for a moment, Sophia couldn't breathe. Her friend, the one person she thought understood her, was urging her to let go of the one thing that had made her feel more alive than anything else. Jake. Torn, Sophia stood up, pacing the room as her mind continued to unravel. The world around her, filled with luxury, was pushing her one way, while her heart, wrapped in the warmth of Jake's love, pulled her in another direction. The walls were closing in. She could hear the ticking of the clock, the inevitable pressure of time passing, and she knew that soon the choice would have to be made. Could she live a life of material wealth, knowing she had abandoned the one person who made her feel truly loved? Or would she walk away from everything she had ever known for the uncertain but passionate future Jake offered her? As the weight of the decision bore down on her, Sophia realized the hardest part wasn't the offer itself. It was choosing which version of her life she wanted to lead. The relationship. A deep connection. Sophia leaned back against the balcony railing, the weight of her decision pressing heavily upon her chest. She closed her eyes, and the sounds of the city faded into a soft hum. In that quiet moment, she allowed herself to drift back to the beginning, the day she met Jake Matthews. It had been a rainy afternoon in early spring, and Sophia had been at one of her usual high society charity events, the kind of evening that was always filled with delicate finger foods, sparkling glasses of champagne, and conversations about stocks and real estate. She had grown tired of the shallow chatter and had excused herself to step outside for a breath of fresh air. The event had been hosted in a trendy art gallery downtown, and she had been standing near a window, staring out at the rain as it poured over the city streets. She was lost in thought, as always, when she had heard someone approach. "Beautiful night for a storm," a voice had said, with a hint of amusement. Sophia had turned to find a young man standing next to her, his dark hair slightly damp from the rain, wearing a worn leather jacket and a pair of faded jeans. He wasn't dressed in the formal attire that everyone else was wearing, nor did he seem to belong in the world of glimmering chandeliers and designer gowns. He was different, authentic, with a quiet confidence that was far more compelling than the shallow smiles she was used to. "I suppose it's beautiful in its own way," she had replied, her curiosity piqued. He had a warm, genuine smile, one that made her feel like she wasn't just another face in a crowd. "My name's Jake," he had introduced himself, his eyes meeting hers with an openness she hadn't seen in anyone else. "I don't suppose you're a fan of these kinds of events, are you?" Sophia had laughed softly. "You could say that. I've been here too many times to count." Jake had shrugged, unfazed. "I get that. I'm actually here because my sister works in the catering department. Not exactly my scene either." They had continued talking, the conversation flowing easily as they shared their thoughts on art, literature, and life. There was no pretension, no subtle push to impress, just two people, exchanging words without any agenda, without the weight of status hanging over them. The more they talked, the more Sophia realized how different Jake was from the men in her life. He wasn't interested in her family's money or her connections. He simply wanted to know her. It wasn't long before they had become inseparable. Sophia had found herself drawn to his world, one that was free from the demands of wealth and status, one where love was something real, not transactional. Jake had an apartment in a bohemian part of the city, and while it was small and modest, it was filled with his paintings, music, and creativity. He had a passion for art that was palpable, and it wasn't just the art he created, it was the way he viewed the world. Everything was vibrant to him, full of possibility and beauty. He showed her a side of life that she had never known, one that didn't require perfection or performance, but rather sincerity and honesty. In the months that followed, Sophia and Jake shared many simple but profound moments together. They would take long walks in the park on weekends, laughing over inside jokes and enjoying each other's company. She would sit for hours with him in his studio, watching as he painted, mesmerized by the way he captured the world with a brush. He had no interest in the glamorous art world, no desire to sell his work for fame or fortune. For him, art was about expression, about telling a story that only he could tell. But their relationship had never been without its challenges. As much as they tried to ignore the glaring differences between their worlds, they were always there, looming in the background. Jake's modest lifestyle, though free of the constraints that Sophia felt in her own life, had its own hardships. He struggled to make ends meet, scraping by from one painting to the next. While she enjoyed fine dinners and luxury vacations, Jake would save every penny for supplies and rent, never willing to ask for help. There had been times when he would cancel their plans because he simply couldn't afford to go anywhere or buy her a gift. And while Sophia had never cared for material things, she hated the feeling of being the one to always offer to pay for dinner or the tickets to a show. It wasn't just about money, though. The truth was that Sophia was constantly torn between two worlds. Her family, her friends, and society in general had made it clear that a relationship like hers with Jake was impractical. He didn't belong in her world. He couldn't offer her the same security or success that the men in her life could. When they had attended a few of her family's gatherings, it had been obvious that Jake didn't quite fit in. Her father had barely acknowledged him, and her mother had made her discomfort clear with every icy smile. But despite the challenges, Sophia had never felt more alive than when she was with Jake. She loved the simplicity of their relationship, the genuine nature of their connection. There was no need for grand gestures or extravagant promises, only a shared understanding, an unspoken bond that was stronger than anything money could provide. Jake had been her rock, her escape from the suffocating world of wealth and status, and in return, she had given him her heart. Now, as she stood on the precipice of a decision that would change everything, she couldn't help but reflect on those moments. The quiet mornings spent with Jake in his studio, the laughter they shared over coffee, the way his eyes sparkled when he talked about his dreams. The warmth of their love had been a sanctuary in a world that often felt cold and calculated. It was real. It was pure. And it was something she couldn't imagine walking away from, even if the price was everything her family had worked for. She knew that if she chose Jake, life would be difficult, filled with uncertainty and sacrifice. But for the first time in her life, Sophia realized that perhaps true wealth wasn't measured by the size of a bank account or the grandeur of a mansion. Perhaps true wealth was measured by the depth of connection, the authenticity of love, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for what truly mattered. The temptation intensifies. Sophia sat in the lavish restaurant's private room, the crystal chandeliers casting soft, golden light over the polished table. The place was a symbol of everything she had been raised to aspire to: luxury, success, and power. But tonight, it felt suffocating. The soft clinking of silverware against china and the murmurs of the city outside did little to soothe her frayed nerves. Across from her sat Miles Harper, the ever-assertive partner in her father's business, a man who knew how to use words like a blade, cutting straight to the heart of every matter. He had been persistent, relentless even, since he made the offer, and tonight he had come with a new set of temptations. "I trust you've had time to think about the Ocelot deal, Sophia," Miles said, his voice smooth, polished, as always. He studied her intently, his eyes sharp, noting every flicker of emotion that passed across her face. Sophia barely met his gaze, her fingers absently tracing the rim of her glass. The temptation had been growing by the day, the allure of the offer as tantalizing as it was dangerous. What Miles was offering wasn't just money. It was a future of security, a future where she could have everything. But what would it cost her? "I've been thinking," she said, her voice quiet but steady. "I understand the significance of the deal, but I'm not sure it's the right time for me to make such a decision." Miles leaned forward, his expression shifting from patient to slightly more intense. "Sophia, I know this is hard, but you have to see this for what it is. You're standing on the brink of something monumental. This isn't just about the money, it's about legacy. Your father's legacy. The Hartley name will become a titan in the global market. You'll be the one to carry it forward, to secure your family's place in history. Think about the future you could create, the power, the influence, the respect." He let those words hang in the air, heavy and loaded, before adding, "Imagine how it would feel to be at the top, untouchable, to never worry about money again, to have access to the world's finest everything. I can make that happen for you, Sophia. You wouldn't need to worry about anything, not ever again. I'm offering you a life free of doubt, free of limitations." His words echoed in her mind, and she couldn't help but picture it. The life of absolute control, where every step she took was calculated, where every desire could be met without hesitation. A life without fear of failure, a life where everything she'd ever wanted was within reach. But even as the thought settled in her mind, her heart twisted in protest. She thought of Jake, his laughter, the way he made her feel understood and valued for who she was, not what she could offer. With Jake, there were no strings attached, no expectations of grandeur. It was messy, imperfect, but real. It was everything that the polished world around her wasn't. Miles seemed to read her inner conflict as if it were written across her face. "I understand that you've built something with Jake," he said, his voice softer now, as if he was trying to be more persuasive. But think carefully, Sophia. Jake can't give you what this opportunity offers. He can't provide you with the security or the future that your family has spent decades building. He's an artist, not a businessman. He's living in a world that can't protect you. The world I'm offering you? It's a fortress. It's the kind of success you've been raised to embrace. His words cut deeper than Sophia expected. Was he right? Could she really continue to live in a world of uncertainty and struggle with Jake when the alternative was this: security, luxury, and success? Could she really pass up the chance to provide her family with the future they had worked so hard to build? Miles paused, letting the silence fill the room before he added, "I'm not saying you have to forget Jake. I'm not saying you can't still have love, but you need to face reality. You can't live on love alone, Sophia. People respect power, people respect success. And that's the world you need to be in. It's the world your father built. And now, it's your turn to take the reins." Sophia's head spun, the words crashing through her like a tidal wave. The idea of success, the endless possibilities, the wealth that could bring her comfort. It all sounded so tempting. She could picture herself at the helm of the Hartley Empire, a woman of influence, making decisions that impacted nations. The world would look at her with admiration and respect. She could change everything for herself, for her family, and for generations to come. But at what cost? Her thoughts were interrupted by a familiar sensation. Her phone vibrating gently in her bag. She pulled it out without thinking, and the screen displayed Jake's name. A simple message. "I miss you. Let's take a walk in the park tomorrow, just like old times." Her chest tightened, her heart aching with the warmth of his words. Every part of her wanted to say yes, to walk away from the sterile world Miles was presenting and embrace the simplicity of Jake's love. But could she? Could she afford to abandon everything her family had worked for? Miles watched her with a knowing look, as if he could sense the internal battle raging inside her. "I know it's not easy, but this is your chance, Sophia. This is your moment to step into your destiny. Don't let love blind you to what you deserve." His words rang in her ears, and as the tension between them grew, Sophia felt herself pulled in two directions, one toward the world of security and endless possibilities, the other toward a love that had given her more joy than all the wealth in the world ever could. As Miles continued to speak, her thoughts drifted, her mind clouded with the promises of a future that glistened with wealth and power. But her heart, beating fiercely in her chest, whispered a different truth, a truth that seemed both far too simple and far too complex. Love, she knew, was worth the risk, but was it enough to overcome the promise of everything she had ever been taught to desire? Reflection, seeking guidance. The decision weighed heavily on Sophia's heart, pulling her in two opposing directions. She had never felt so torn in her life. The world of business, of wealth and success was so tempting, so promising. Yet her heart ached for the love she shared with Jake, the quiet, unassuming artist who had shown her what it truly meant to live authentically. She needed someone to help her make sense of it all, someone who could help her find clarity. It was then that she thought of Alice. Alice had been a mentor to Sophia ever since she was a little girl. She was her mother's oldest friend, but to Sophia, Alice had always been more like a second mother. A wise, warm woman, Alice had seen it all. Both the highs and the lows that came with living in a world of privilege and power. Alice had married a successful businessman, but unlike many others in her circle, she had never lost sight of the things that truly mattered. She had always believed that the most important part of life wasn't the wealth you acquired or the status you attained. It was the love and connections you nurtured along the way. Sophia had always admired Alice's wisdom and grace, and in times of uncertainty, Alice was the person she turned to. Today, Sophia needed her more than ever. She called Alice, her voice tight with emotion. "Alice, can I come over? I need to talk." "Of course, darling," Alice replied, her voice soothing and reassuring. "I'll be here." A short time later, Sophia stood at Alice's door, her mind still spinning with the weight of her choices. Alice opened the door with a smile, her warm presence instantly calming Sophia's frazzled nerves. Without a word, Alice ushered her in, pouring them both a cup of tea, and led her to the cozy sitting room by the fire. The space was filled with books, antiques, and artwork. Everything in Alice's home radiated comfort and wisdom. It was the kind of place that felt like home. They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the crackling of the fire. Finally, Sophia spoke, her voice wavering. "I don't know what to do, Alice. Miles, he's offered me everything. He's offered me a future of success, power, money, everything I could ever want. I could have it all. But it's not what I really want. It's not the life I want for myself. I I don't know if I should choose Jake. He's not going to give me anything that Miles can, and I don't want to let my family down." Alice watched her carefully, her eyes soft with understanding. She set her teacup down and leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. "Sweetheart," Alice began, her tone full of kindness but with an underlying strength. "I know how hard this is. I know how tempting the idea of security and success can be. But let me tell you something that's taken me years to fully understand. Money and power are like sand in your hands. You can hold on to them for a time, but they slip away so easily. They don't fill you up the way love and connection do." Sophia looked up, her brow furrowing in confusion. Alice continued, her voice calm but filled with conviction. "When you're lying on your deathbed, what will you wish for? More money? More accolades? More status? No, my dear. You will wish for the people you loved, for the relationships you nurtured, for the moments that made you feel truly alive. Money can buy you comfort, yes, but it can't buy you happiness. It can't give you the sense of belonging, the warmth of a hand to hold when life gets hard. And those things, those are what truly matter." Sophia felt a lump form in her throat as she listened to Alice's words. She had always known this on some level, but hearing it from someone she trusted so deeply made it resonate in a way she hadn't expected. The weight of her decision didn't feel as heavy anymore. It felt clearer. Alice continued, her voice softening even further. "Love is what fills your soul, Sophia. Love is what sustains you. Not just romantic love, but the love of family, of friends, of the people who see you for who you truly are. Jake may not have wealth or power, but he has something much more valuable. A heart that loves you for all of you, without pretense, without expectation. He makes you feel seen, heard, and understood. That kind of love is rare. And if you let it go in favor of something that's fleeting, you might find yourself empty, no matter how much money you have in your bank account." Sophia's heart clenched as Alice's words sank in. She thought of Jake, the way he had always made her feel cherished, the way his love had never been about what she could offer but about who she was. She thought of their quiet moments together, the shared laughter, the simple joy of being in each other's company. In those moments, she had never felt more at home, more truly herself. "Jake is the one who makes me feel alive," Sophia whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "But everything else, my family, the business, it's all so much. I feel like I'm failing them." Alice reached out, taking Sophia's hand in hers, her grip firm but comforting. "You're not failing anyone, darling. The people who truly love you want you to be happy, to live a life that is true to who you are. Your family may not understand it now, but true success isn't measured by how much you have. It's measured by how much you give." Sophia felt a sense of peace wash over her as Alice's words echoed in her heart. For the first time in days, the constant internal tug-of-war slowed, and she realized that what she had with Jake was worth more than all the wealth and success the world could offer. The love they shared was real, and that was the kind of treasure she couldn't afford to lose. Alice smiled softly, her eyes warm with wisdom. "Choose love, Sophia. Choose the people who make you feel whole. And never forget that what truly matters in life is the love you give and receive. That's the wealth that will stay with you forever." Sophia smiled through her tears, feeling the weight on her shoulders lighten. She knew what she had to do now. She knew that choosing love, even at the cost of everything else, was the only path that would lead to a life of true fulfillment. And for the first time in a long while, she felt certain of the choice that awaited her. A moment of clarity. Sophia's steps were steady as she walked through the bustling streets, her mind still clouded with the weight of her decision. The city around her was alive, people rushing to their destinations, the sounds of traffic mingling with the distant chatter of conversation. But to Sophia, it all felt distant, muffled, as if she were walking through a dream. She had made the decision to choose love over money, to stand by Jake and the life they had shared. And yet the uncertainty still gnawed at her. The world she had always known, the world of wealth and privilege, had been so alluring, so promising. Could she really walk away from it all? Could she leave behind the security, the power, the future she had been told was her destiny? Her phone buzzed again. It was another message from Miles. "I hope you've thought this through, Sophia. The offer still stands, and your family is counting on you." She glanced at the message, but didn't respond. She could feel the weight of her family's expectations hanging over her, the pressure to live up to everything they had built. But tonight, as she walked toward Jake, she felt a growing certainty that had eluded her for weeks. She needed to make peace with her choice, no matter what the consequences might be. As she approached the park where they had first met, the dim light of the street lamps casting long shadows on the path, she felt the familiar pull in her chest. She knew Jake would be waiting for her by the old oak tree, the same place they had shared their first kiss, the same place that had witnessed the quiet growth of their love. But as she rounded the corner, she was stopped short by a sight that made her heart stop. Jake was sitting on a bench, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped in grief. She rushed toward him, her heart racing, the world suddenly tilting on its axis. Something was wrong. "Jake!" she called out softly, her voice trembling. He looked up, his eyes red, filled with an emptiness that made Sophia's stomach drop. The sight of him, broken, vulnerable, struck her more deeply than she could have imagined. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice hoarse. "I just found out. My mother passed away this morning." Sophia froze, her heart sinking into her chest. She hadn't known. She hadn't been there. Jake had always been the strong one, the one who supported others, who always made her feel safe. But now, in his pain, he seemed so small, so fragile. Her instincts kicked in, and she knelt down beside him, taking his hand in hers, offering him the comfort he had always given her. A moment of clarity. Sophia's steps were steady as she walked through the bustling streets, her mind still clouded with the weight of her decision. The city around her was alive, people rushing to their destinations, the sounds of traffic mingling with the distant chatter of conversation. But to Sophia, it all felt distant, muffled, as if she were walking through a dream. She had made the decision to choose love over money, to stand by Jake and the life they had shared. And yet the uncertainty still gnawed at her. The world she had always known, the world of wealth and privilege, had been so alluring, so promising. Could she really walk away from it all? Could she leave behind the security, the power, the future she had been told was her destiny? Her phone buzzed again. It was another message from Miles. "I hope you've thought this through, Sophia. The offer still stands, and your family is counting on you." She glanced at the message, but didn't respond. She could feel the weight of her family's expectations hanging over her, the pressure to live up to everything they had built. But tonight, as she walked toward Jake, she felt a growing certainty that had eluded her for weeks. She needed to make peace with her choice, no matter what the consequences might be. As she approached the park where they had first met, the dim light of the street lamps casting long shadows on the path, she felt the familiar pull in her chest. She knew Jake would be waiting for her by the old oak tree, the same place they had shared their first kiss, the same place that had witnessed the quiet growth of their love. But as she rounded the corner, she was stopped short by a sight that made her heart stop. Jake was sitting on a bench, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped in grief. She rushed toward him,
her heart racing, the world suddenly tilting on its axis. Something was wrong. "Jake!" she called out softly, her voice trembling. He looked up, his eyes red, filled with an emptiness that made Sophia's stomach drop. The sight of him, broken, vulnerable, struck her more deeply than she could have imagined. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice hoarse. "I just found out. My mother passed away this morning." Sophia froze, her heart sinking into her chest. She hadn't known. She hadn't been there. Jake had always been the strong one, the one who supported others, who always made her feel safe. But now, in his pain, he seemed so small, so fragile. Her instincts kicked in, and she knelt down beside him, taking his hand in hers, offering him the comfort he had always given her.
I'm so sorry, Jake, she whispered, her voice breaking. I had no idea. I'm here for you, whatever you need. He squeezed her hand, but his gaze remained distant. I don't know how to do this, Sophia, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to move forward. I don't know how to deal with losing her. She was everything to me. Sophia could feel his pain in every word, in every breath. She had always admired Jake's strength, his quiet resilience. But now, in the face of such loss, he was vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. And in that moment, something shifted within her. The weight she had been carrying, the doubts, the fear of making the wrong choice, suddenly melted away. She realized something profound, something she had been too afraid to admit before. True happiness wasn't about the things she could buy, or the legacy she could leave. It wasn't about the empire her family had built, or the wealth they had accumulated. It was about this, about love, about standing by someone in their darkest moment, about being there for the person who needed her, no matter what. Sophia reached up and cupped Jake's face in her hands, her touch gentle but firm. Jake, she said softly, her voice steady now. I know I can't fix this. I know I can't take away your pain, but I want to be here with you. I want to walk through this with you, no matter what. I'm not going anywhere. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something in them, something raw, something that told her that this love they shared, was worth more than anything else she could ever have. Sophia felt a deep, overwhelming clarity wash over her, clearer than any thought she had before. She had spent so much time questioning whether she could choose love over everything else, whether it was worth the risk. But now, looking at Jake, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, she knew. Love wasn't just the thing that made life beautiful. It was the thing that made life worth living. It wasn't the material wealth, the power, or the security that defined a life well lived. It was the connections we made, the people we chose to love, and the sacrifices we were willing to make for them. It was the moments of vulnerability and the quiet strength that came from being there for each other, no matter what. In that moment, with Jake's hand in hers and the weight of his grief hanging in the air, Sophia made a promise to herself. She would never let the fear of losing wealth or the desire for success take her away from what truly mattered. She had chosen love, and it was love that would lead her forward. You're not alone, Jake, she whispered again, her voice full of determination. Not now, not ever. And as she sat beside him, her heart full of certainty and peace, she knew that she had made the right choice. The world of wealth and power could wait, but love was everything. The consequences of choosing love. The weeks that followed Sophia's decision were a whirlwind of change, both challenging and beautiful. After Jake's mother's funeral, there was a quiet period where they simply existed together, navigating grief and healing side by side. It was in those tender moments, long walks in the park, late-night talks, the solace of shared silence, that Sophia truly understood the weight of her choice. Choosing love had meant stepping away from the life she had known, the life of luxury, comfort, and expectation. She had already informed her family of her decision, a conversation that had been both heartbreaking and liberating. Her parents were disappointed, their words carefully veiled in concern, but there was nothing they could say to change her mind.
She was determined to live her life on her own terms, with Jake by her side. The first months after leaving the business world behind were filled with uncertainty. Sophia had given up the lucrative offer from Miles, and with it, the lavish lifestyle she had been born into. The financial cushion that had once been a source of comfort was no longer there. There were moments when she felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. The tension between her old life and the reality she had chosen was sometimes unbearable. Sophia had to adjust to a new way of living, one without the security of wealth, one that required compromise, effort, and trust. There were days when the strain of living on a smaller income felt overwhelming, and she missed the ease that money had provided. But those moments were fleeting, overshadowed by the warmth of Jake's unwavering support. Jake, too, had his own struggles. His grief was far from over, and though they had found moments of peace together, the pain of losing his mother was something he carried with him every day. But as time passed, they both found a rhythm in their lives, one that was slower, more deliberate, but ultimately more fulfilling. They began to dream together, not of wealth or success, but of the simple things, of building a life filled with love, of pursuing passions, and of creating a future that was theirs to shape. There were difficult days. Jake's art career, which had always been a dream of his, began to take shape in small, meaningful ways. But it wasn't without its own challenges. The financial strain from both their choices was evident, and there were moments when Sophia found herself wondering if they had made the right decision. Would it have been easier to stay in the world of business? Would it have been easier to take the money and live a life of comfort? These questions sometimes gnawed at her, but each time she reminded herself of the clarity she had found in choosing love. And then, one cold afternoon in December, as the first snowflakes began to fall, something shifted. Sophia was sitting at their small kitchen table, a cup of tea in her hands, watching Jake work on a canvas in the corner of their modest apartment. It had become their sanctuary, this little space filled with warmth and love, despite the uncertainties. Jake had been painting nonstop, channeling his grief and passion into his art. And one by one, his works began to sell. Not for millions, not for a fortune, but enough to pay the bills, enough to remind them both that they were on the right path. Sophia was looking at the latest painting Jake had finished. A beautiful landscape, vibrant with color, full of life. She had seen him struggle with the brushstrokes, unsure of his direction, but now the finished piece took her breath away. It was clear he was finding his voice, and it was beautiful. "Jake, this is incredible," she said softly, a smile tugging at her lips. "It's perfect." He looked up, his face weary but full of quiet pride. "I think it's the one." In that moment, as she gazed at the canvas, Sophia realized something profound. She had made a choice, a hard, uncertain, and terrifying choice. But in the end, it was the right one. This life, the one filled with love, passion, and authenticity, was what brought her peace. The comfort she had once thought she needed wasn't found in money or status, but in the connection she shared with Jake, in the way they supported each other, and in the life they were building together. A few weeks later, Jake's artwork was featured in a local gallery. The turnout was modest, but full of potential. People were starting to recognize his talent, and the more they saw, the more they wanted to support him. The art world was not kind to everyone, but for Jake, and for them as a couple, this small step felt like a giant leap towards something meaningful. Sophia had started her own small business, a boutique that sold sustainable and ethically sourced products, something that combined her love for the environment with a sense of purpose.
It wasn't as lucrative as the corporate world had promised, but it was hers. It gave her a sense of fulfillment that she had never known. Every day she woke up with a sense of purpose, knowing that her decisions, though difficult, were leading her to a life that was aligned with who she truly was. One evening, as they sat together on their couch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Sophia felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over her. The struggles, the sacrifices, the doubts, they were all still there. But in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of their little apartment, the love they had shared, and the future they were building together, she knew that true happiness had never been about money or success. It had been about the people who loved her, the passions she pursued, and the life she had chosen to live with Jake. For the first time since her decision, Sophia felt completely at home. The path they had chosen was far from easy, but it was the one that had brought her peace. And with Jake by her side, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, with love as their guiding light. And that, she realized, was more than enough. Conclusion: the power of love over money. As the years passed, Sophia and Jake's life continued to evolve, and with each passing day, the truth of her decision became clearer. She had never imagined that choosing love over money would lead her here, not to a life of opulence, but to one filled with meaning, purpose, and profound connection. Looking back on the journey, the struggles, the doubts, and the moments of joy, she knew with certainty that love had been the key all along. One afternoon, as she sat on the balcony of their small but cozy home, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Sophia reflected on how far they had come. The road had been anything but easy. There had been times when she questioned her choices, when she felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. But every time she looked at Jake, every time she saw the way he poured his heart into his art, or felt the quiet comfort of their shared life, she knew she had made the right choice. Their life wasn't perfect. They had faced challenges, financial ones, emotional ones, and the endless pressure from a society that valued wealth above all else. But through it all, they had something that money could never buy: each other. It wasn't the size of their apartment, the brand of their clothes, or the name on a business card that defined them. It was the quiet moments, making dinner together in their small kitchen, walking hand in hand through the park, supporting each other through the inevitable ups and downs of life. That made all the difference. Sophia thought back to the day she had made her decision, the day she had chosen Jake over the promises of wealth, the day she had turned away from a life of luxury to pursue something far more valuable. She had wondered if love would be enough, if it could fill the emptiness that wealth might have filled. But now, as she watched Jake smile at her from across the room, she knew that love was not only enough, it was everything. Love had been her anchor, her strength, her purpose. It had given her the courage to stand up to her fears, to step away from the life she had known, and to build a new one based on authenticity and connection. Money had promised security, but love had given her fulfillment. Wealth had offered temporary comfort, but love had given her a lifetime of peace. Sophia smiled, feeling the weight of her journey lift off her shoulders. It hadn't been the easy path, but it had been the right one. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she whispered to herself, "Love is more than enough." In that moment, she knew that no amount of money could ever compare to the priceless treasure she had found in her heart. Because in the end, love wasn't just the thing that made life beautiful. It was the thing that made life worth living. And with Jake by her side, Sophia knew that no matter what came their way, love would always be enough to carry them through.